Welcome back, everybody. Today we're taking a deep dive into something really captivating, the stories of women who made history. And not just any women. We're going to be talking about the ones you might not know as well. The unsung heroes, I guess you could call them. You know, the ones whose achievements might have been overshadowed or even forgotten.
It's truly remarkable how much we learn by digging a little deeper into history, you know?
Right.
Like really uncovering these hidden figures. It completely changes how we see how things happen and the people who shaped the world.
You've given us some really great material to work with for this. Deep dive articles from History.com, some pieces from Medium from both Token Tales and M.A. Mir, research from UT Permian Basin Online, and even some things from the White House archives.
Wow.
It's a real mix. And today we're going to use all of this to explore the stories of some amazing women and look at how they impacted their times and beyond.
Absolutely, and I think what's really interesting is how many of these women faced some pretty huge obstacles, whether it was societal expectations, you know, just limited opportunities, or even outright discrimination.
Yeah.
And yet they still achieved incredible things, made significant contributions in so many different fields: science, technology, activism, the arts, you name it.
It's like they had to jump over hurdles twice as high as anyone else just to be in the race, and they still won.
That's a good way to put it.
I think a great place to start would be with a woman who, well, quite literally ran right through a barrier.
Oh, okay.
Katherine Switzer at the 1967 Boston Marathon. Back then, women running marathons, that was considered outrageous.
Oh, yeah.
And the organizers, well, I made it very clear that women were not welcome.
Not at all. It was a very different time.
So what Katherine did, it was incredibly audacious. She registered for the race using her initials, KV Switzer, you know, hoping to kind of just slip under the radar. But when she was spotted on the course, one of the organizers actually tried to physically remove her, yelling, "Get the hell out of my race and give me those numbers."
Oh my goodness. What did she do?
Can you imagine the nerve it took to keep running after that?
I can't.
Well, she didn't just finish the race.
No.
She finished it in a really good time, about 4.5 hours.
Wow. That's incredible.
What's really cool is that her defiance kind of sparked this nationwide conversation about women in athletics.
Yeah, I can see how that would happen.
And you want to know something? 5 years later, the Boston Marathon officially allowed women to compete.
That's amazing.
Her actions, they didn't just change her life, it helped to change the rules for women runners everywhere.
I love that. It really shows how one person's bravery can start a movement and lead to, like, lasting change.
It makes you wonder, you know, why were there rules against women running marathons in the first place? What did those rules say about how society saw women back then?
That is such an important point. So often these stories about unsung women aren't just about what they achieved, they're about challenging, like, these deeply ingrained societal norms and expectations. It takes real courage.
It really does. And speaking of courageous women who challenged the status quo, let's talk about Claudette Colvin.
Yeah.
I think most people have heard of Rosa Parks.
Yeah.
And her refusal to give up her seat on a Montgomery bus, that act had sparked the Montgomery bus boycott.
Right.
But Claudette's story, it takes us back even further. So 9 months before Rosa Parks' famous act of defiance, 15-year-old Claudette, she did the exact same thing.
Really? I didn't know that.
It's true. She faced such intense backlash,
Well, I can only imagine.
arrested and charged for violating segregation laws.
It's unbelievable.
But here's what makes her story even more fascinating. The NAACP, the organization that was leading the fight for civil rights, well, they were looking for the right face for their movement.
Interesting.
They ended up choosing Rosa Parks, a woman they felt would be more relatable and less controversial to the public.
Wow. It makes you think about how history is shaped by who gets to tell the story and who decides which voices get amplified. It's really powerful.
It's a good thing that Claudette Colvin's story is finally getting the recognition it deserves.
Absolutely. It adds so much to our understanding of the civil rights movement and highlights how important young people were.
Yeah.
And how complex it is to choose who becomes a symbol for a cause.
It's a great reminder that history is rarely simple or straightforward. So let's move on to some women who shaped history outside of the traditionally celebrated roles.
Okay.
Our sources talk about 2 women from Pakistan, Fatima Begum and Begum Shaista Suhrawardy Ikramullah.
Okay.
And these women were so instrumental in fighting for women's rights and education during the very difficult time when Pakistan was being formed in 1947.
Imagine trying to build a nation from scratch while also fighting for the rights of women who were so often marginalized and overlooked.
It's incredible. Fatima Begum, she became a pioneering journalist. She founded one of the first women's magazines in Pakistan. And Begum Shaista, she served as a delegate to the United Nations and helped to shape the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Wow, they really made an impact on both a national and global scale.
Their stories really highlight the crucial but often unseen work that goes into building a nation. The education, the advocacy, the tireless efforts to make a more just and fair society.
Absolutely. They were paving the way for future generations of women,
Yeah.
giving them a voice and a role in shaping their country's destiny. And their stories also remind us that progress can be slow. It often means working behind the scenes, out of the spotlight.
And then you have someone like Hedy Lamarr. Talk about someone who defies categorization.
Oh, yeah.
She was a Hollywood actress.
Right.
They called her the most beautiful woman in film. But get this, she also co-invented a frequency hopping technology during World War II.
No way.
Yeah. And it eventually led to what we have today, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi.
Really? Wow.
Every time you connect to the internet wirelessly, think of Hedy Lamarr. It's mind-blowing. She developed this technology when women in science, well, they were often just dismissed or not taken seriously.
It's amazing to think about. How did she balance her Hollywood image with her scientific work?
I know, right? And did people even believe that she was capable of creating something like that?
That's a great question. It really speaks to the limitations and expectations they put on women, especially back then. Hedy's story totally challenges those expectations. She refused to be defined by just one role or one part of who she was.
That's such a powerful message. It's like it reminds us that we can be multifaceted, that our talents and abilities aren't limited by what society expects of us or stereotypes.
Exactly, and that sometimes breaking those stereotypes can lead to amazing discoveries.
Let's dive into a field where women have made some truly groundbreaking contributions, but their achievements have often been minimized or even stolen. Science. Rosalind Franklin's role in discovering the double helix structure of DNA is a perfect example.
Her story is both fascinating and kind of sad. She was a brilliant chemist and X-ray crystallographer.
Yeah.
And she captured this crucial image, they call it Photo 51. It actually revealed the double helix structure of DNA. But then her work was shared, without her knowing, with James Watson and Francis Crick.
Oh, no.
They ended up publishing the findings and they won the Nobel Prize.
It's really a stark reminder of the ethical dilemmas in scientific discovery and how women's contributions have often been overshadowed or erased from history.
Absolutely. Rosalind's story raises some really important questions about scientific credit and intellectual property and, recognizing everyone who contributed to a discovery. It's so crucial to acknowledge her role in one of the most significant scientific breakthroughs of the 20th century.
You're so right. And it's sad because Rosalind's story isn't unique. Take Jocelyn Burnell, for example. She was a graduate student when she discovered pulsars.
Pulsars.
Yeah, those rapidly rotating neutron stars that emit beams of radiation.
Oh, okay, yeah, I've heard of those.
But guess who got the Nobel Prize for that discovery?
I have a bad feeling about this. Who?
Her advisor. He acknowledged her contribution, but the fact that she wasn't included in the Nobel Prize, many see it as a blatant example of the bias and power dynamics in academia, especially against women.
It's disheartening for sure, but it's also a call to action, I think. We need to keep pushing for more recognition and equity in all fields, science included.
Couldn't agree more. We need a culture where everyone, no matter their gender or background, has the opportunity to contribute and get recognized for their work.
Absolutely.
And, while we're talking about women who deserve recognition, let's mention Martha Gautier.
Okay.
She was a French physician who played a really important role in discovering the cause of Down syndrome, a genetic disorder caused by an extra chromosome. But a male colleague took credit for her work.
Oh no, not again.
It took decades for her contributions to be acknowledged. It's really disheartening, but you know what?
Yeah.
Stories like Rosalind's, Jocelyn's, and Martha's, they're also a reminder. They remind us to challenge the status quo, to make sure women's voices are heard, and ensure that their contributions are celebrated and remembered.
It's all about creating a more accurate and inclusive understanding of history, one that recognizes how crucial women have been in shaping our world.
Exactly. And that's why these deep dives are so important. They let us uncover these hidden stories, celebrate the remarkable women who have been overlooked for far too long.
I totally agree. It's so fascinating.
It's really like We're putting together this puzzle, but some of the pieces were missing.
Yeah.
And now we're finally starting to see the full picture, the incredible things that these women accomplished.
Amazing.
There's still so much more to uncover. So let's dive back into our sources.
Okay.
And introduce a few more of these extraordinary women.
Sounds good.
What about Anna Roqué Duprey?
Oh, she's a fascinating one. Born in Puerto Rico in 1853. Back then, the opportunities for women, especially when it came to education and science, were so limited.
It was a completely different world.
Right. But she was a true trailblazer in so many areas.
You know, I was blown away when I learned that she started a school in her own home when she was just 13 years old. That's dedication to learning. And she didn't stop there. She became an astronomer, a writer, an educator, and even a suffragist, fighting for women's right to vote.
She was a force to be reckoned with, that's for sure. Always pushing boundaries and creating opportunities for herself and other women.
And her influence really spread across Puerto Rican society. She even wrote a geography textbook that was used by the Department of Education.
Really? That's incredible.
Think about the impact she had on generations of students. It's amazing.
It really shows that even when society tries to hold you back, you can still make a huge difference.
Absolutely. Okay, so now let's switch gears a little bit and talk about a woman who made groundbreaking contributions to the world of physics.
Okay.
Chien-Shiung.
Oh, I've heard of her. She was a brilliant experimental physicist who worked on the Manhattan Project, right?
That's right. But it was her work after the war that really solidified her place in history. She did this groundbreaking experiment that disproved a fundamental law of physics. It was called the law of conservation of parity.
Okay, I have to admit, you might have to refresh my memory on that one.
So basically, the law of parity said that the laws of physics are the same for particles and their mirror images. It was a long-held belief in physics, but Chien-Shiung's experiment showed that, well, it wasn't always true, especially when it comes to those tiny subatomic particles.
So her experiment kind of turned the physics world upside down.
You could say that. It had a huge impact on how we understand the universe. It opened up new avenues of research and really helped refine our knowledge of the fundamental forces at play. And what's even more impressive is that she achieved all of this when women in science face so much prejudice and discrimination.
It's a great reminder that amazing discoveries can come from anyone, no matter their gender or background.
Absolutely. Okay, so now let's travel to Pakistan.
Okay.
And meet a woman who has shown such incredible strength and resilience in the face of unimaginable adversity, Mukhtaran Mai.
Her story is both heartbreaking and inspiring. She was the victim of a horrific gang rape. And even worse, it was sanctioned by a village council as some kind of twisted form of justice.
It's hard to even fathom something like that.
I know. But instead of being silenced by this trauma, she decided to speak out. To seek justice, not just for herself, but for all the other women who had suffered similar atrocities.
Her bravery in the face of such injustice is truly remarkable.
It really is. And she didn't stop there. She went on to establish schools and women's shelters.
Wow.
Working tirelessly to empower women and girls in her community.
She really turned her pain into a force for good.
She became a powerful advocate for women's rights and a symbol of hope for survivors of sexual violence. It's a testament to the human spirit, to overcome even the most difficult challenges and use that experience to create positive change.
You're absolutely right. Okay, let's bring it back to the U.S. for a moment and talk about a woman whose work has had a profound impact on how we understand and measure poverty. Molly Orshansky.
Molly Orshansky was an economist and statistician, and she worked for the Social Security Administration. In the 1960s, she came up with a set of poverty thresholds that are still being used by the U.S. government today.
It's incredible how her work from so long ago is still relevant.
I know. She basically created a way to figure out the minimum income a family would need to meet their basic needs.
And these thresholds have been used to track poverty rates, decide how to allocate resources, and shape social policy for decades.
It's amazing to think about the lasting impact she's had on millions of lives. Her work has helped identify people who need help and ensure they get the support they deserve. It really shows how you can use data and analysis to make positive changes in society.
Exactly. Okay, so we have time for one more. Let's highlight another amazing woman in STEM.
Okay, who is it?
Edith Clarke.
Edith Clarke. Oh, she was an electrical engineer, made some big contributions to developing electric power systems in the early 1900s.
It's mind-boggling when you think about the time period she was working in. Women weren't even allowed to eat in the college cafeteria.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
That was the environment she had to navigate. But she didn't let that stop her. She went on to become the first professionally employed female electrical engineer in the U.S.
That's so impressive.
It's hard to imagine all the obstacles she must have faced.
I know, right?
And yet she became a leader in her field, developing new ways to calculate electrical loads and design more efficient power systems.
Wow, so her work literally helped power the modern world.
You could say that. She paved the way for so many other women in engineering,
It's amazing.
proving that they could excel in fields that were traditionally dominated by men. Her story is a true testament to the power of perseverance and how important it is to break down gender stereotypes in STEM.
Absolutely. So we've covered a lot of ground here. We've talked about so many incredible women and their achievements. I'm curious, have you noticed any common threads running through these stories? What stands out to you?
When we include these different voices and viewpoints, it makes our understanding of history so much richer.
Right?
It's like we were only looking at half the story before.
Yeah.
And now we can finally see the whole picture.
Yeah.
The amazing details and contributions that these women made.
It's incredible.
But it makes you wonder,
What?
how many more amazing discoveries, inventions, and movements might we have known about if history had been a little fairer to women?
It's definitely something to think about, but it also shows how important it is to keep digging deeper, to question the stories we've been told, and to look for the voices that have been silenced or pushed aside.
I think it all starts with awareness. Recognizing that history isn't just about dates and battles, but about the real lives and experiences of people,
Yeah,
especially those who've been overlooked or forgotten.
absolutely. And understanding that history is always changing. It's constantly being reinterpreted and rewritten as we find new evidence and hear new perspectives.
And maybe, just maybe, by learning about these hidden stories and celebrating the things that these unsung women accomplished,
Yeah.
maybe we can inspire future generations to create a world that's more just and equal. A world where everyone has the chance to reach their full potential and make their mark on history.
That's a beautiful thought. And I think we all have a part to play in making that happen. We can start by supporting the women in our lives, amplifying their voices, and celebrating what they achieve.
And maybe, just maybe, those future generations will look back and wonder why we even needed a term like unsung heroines. Maybe their accomplishments will be so much a part of history that they're just seen as heroes, period.
What a powerful idea. A world where what women achieve is celebrated and recognized without needing special categories or labels. A world where their stories are woven into our shared human story.
That's a future worth working towards. And I really believe that by continuing to explore, to question, and to celebrate these unsung heroes, we can make that vision a reality. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the inspiring world of women who made history.